Thank you for attending this session. My name is Sean Haney, founder of Real Agriculture and host of Real Ag Radio on Rural Radio 147. I want to introduce to you Dr. Chad Koscielny. He is currently the North American canola breeding lead at Corteva Agriscience. He grew up on a grain farm close to Cardale, Manitoba, and attended the University of Manitoba, where he completed his Bachelor of Science and Master's of Science in Agronomy and a PhD in plant breeding. For the past 19 years, Chad has worked in numerous roles, all dedicated to canola and soybean breeding. He currently works out of the Corteva Agriscience Research Station in Carmen, Manitoba, and lives close to Miami, Manitoba, not Miami, Florida, with his wife and 4 kids. Let's welcome Dr. Chad Koscielny.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending, showing up. Get my slides up here. Oh, there we go. So today, I'm going to introduce a little bit about the canola breeding program and some of our Clubroot technology from Corteva Agriscience. And just further to that introduction, it's been about 2 decades. I've been measuring my time at Corteva and in canola research in decades now, unfortunately. Walking across plots throughout Western Canada. So, attended U of M. In my spare time, I'm the president of the Miami Curling Club. That was us putting the ice in this past November. That's where I can be found Thursday evenings. Summertime, spend a bit of time running. That picture in the middle there is me finishing my first 100-mile race. And you can see running that far isn't healthy for you. My wife's told me that many times. It's aged me about 10 years that day. And on the far right is a picture of my family, and they take up most of my time, right? Hockey, gymnastics, 4-H. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. So that's what most of my spare time spent doing. Corteva Agriscience, relatively new company, right? Last year, new brand, new name. This was put up by a scientist out of the US. This is all the company's germplasm, the corn and soybean germplasm that is funneled in to the various companies that have gone on to become what is Corteva Agriscience. And this is just the corn and soybean piece of things, right? And so you can imagine all these companies going back to the 1920s. What's behind this is all the people in those companies, right? Coming together to continue to solve problems, right? And there's always been new companies coming in to solve other problems, right? And the constant evolution in agriculture. So that is what Corteva Agriscience is about right now, the tie-up between Dow and DuPont and the spin-out of the Agriscience division so that we can focus on agriculture alone and really deliver on some of those promises to solve some challenges. So back up a little bit, I always like to start any of my canola research talks with the world production map of canola, right? And so North America is approximately equal in size to the Europe, Ukraine, and Russia markets. We're a little bit behind in terms of overall production, but in terms of exports, we are the main contributor to the export market. And if anybody attended the Oil World talk, right, a lot of this information aligns with what David had presented as well. The Brassica gensea out of India, it's high glucosinolates, it's domestic only. They do import some canola on occasion. And some 2019 trends, as David had mentioned, right, Europe had a lot lower yields and therefore lower plantings. It was really dry. And also the neonic issue in Europe has really limited their ability to get a crop established and grow a valuable crop in Europe. So Ukraine and Russia, they're increasing spring area, but it's not, I don't think it's going to take time in those geographies to really ramp up spring canola. Because for those of you that don't know, in Europe, it's predominantly winter canola, seeded in September, harvested the following July. Australia, obviously, really low yields. I'm sure many people have seen on the news, all the fires, all the issues. They seed here in May, so we'll have a really good indication in May if they've had enough moisture to plant another crop or not. And if not, then the planting down in Australia is going to be a lot lower, leading to tighter supplies in canola overall. And China, a little more difficult to get numbers out of China, but essentially flat to lower production is expected out of China. Come down a little closer to home, North America. Our global head office is down just outside of Mississauga, Ontario, Georgetown, Ontario. Breeding facility in Carmen, Saskatoon, Edmonton, and our production facility in Lethbridge. So we're spread out across Canada with the major focus obviously on canola in Western Canada. The purpose of today's talk, right, is breeding for industry sustainability and profitability, right? I want to make sure that we at Corteva are aligned with increasing overall industry sustainability and increasing profits overall, right? We need to all win for this market to continue, right? And we're going to do this by reducing risk, increasing value, and simplifying management. And hopefully you get some of these themes as we go through this presentation. This was taken from the Canola Council of Canada, this infographic. I think it's a really good one, trying to get us to that average yield of 52 bushel an acre, right? They're really pushing us to try to increase yields overall in Western Canada. And you can see we've come, how far we've come, right? 2011 to 13, we were at 34 bushel an acre, and we've gone up to 41 bushel an acre more recently. But there's still a big gap between an average of 41 and 52. And I know a number of people in this room have probably achieved 52 bushel an acre or a lot more, but we need to get that average in Western Canada up over 52 bushel an acre. And they've laid out some guidelines as to how they think we can achieve this. And so as we go through, I'm going to just talk on each one of these points to talk about what we're doing at Corteva to try to get these gains in canola. Given I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, I'm going to start off with Clubroot. It's going to probably take up the majority of the time, right? You can see the provincial Clubroot maps. Not a surprise to probably a lot of people in these rooms. We're at the epicenter of Clubroot in Edmonton, but it's spreading in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Eventually, it's going to be throughout Western Canada, soil-borne disease, right? So it's going to travel. At Corteva, it was recognized early. We had a fellow in the company, Igor Falak, recognized early that Clubroot was a potential issue. And the reason he did is because he was aware of it and its effects in Europe within our European breeding programs. And so he got on this early, and we were able to launch 45H29 back in 2009, first to market with a Clubroot resistant product. And really, we were concerned at that time with, right, how do we continue to deliver this? What do we do? We thought we maybe had it solved, but every year it seems to spend more and more of our time focusing on Clubroot and being able to deliver Clubroot resistant products to the marketplace, right? So you can see the evolution there. This is just a subset of the overall products we've delivered with Clubroot resistance. Our mandate now from the business to the research group is they will not commercialize anything that does not have Clubroot resistance in it now, right? So that is every commercial product that we deploy from now on at Corteva will have some form of Clubroot resistance in it. You can see 45CS40, that was a Clubroot Sclerotinia stack. We're starting to stack these traits, and that was another request from the business, right, is combine some of these traits together. Our Nexera series was delivered after that with Clubroot resistance. 45CM39 has a Harvest Max and Clubroot resistance in it, again starting to stack those traits. With the most recent launch was Brevant 3010M, which is a Liberty Link Harvest Max Clubroot product. And if we say 45H29 was our CR1, so that was the first deployment of our Clubroot genetics. There's now becoming more and more resistance packages that we're discovering and trying to get deployed in our commercial products. So the first one that was different was 45CM39. It's actually got 2 different resistance genes than our CR1 products, right? And it's effective against the 5X and some of the other pathotypes that CR1 is not effective against. And then Brevant 3010M has another unique, different gene in it that is, again, effective against these predominant pathotypes out there. So we have 3 different resistance mechanisms currently deployed in the marketplace, and we're going to continue to spread that across more products, and we're going to continue to drive more resistance mechanisms within the germplasm to offer flexibility and continue to drive that sustainability piece. But with that, I want to make sure that people don't, there's a number of other comments that I'm going to make around that we can't rely on the resistance mechanisms alone, right? I'm going to ask for a little bit of help during this presentation to maintain the sustainability around Clubroot. We got a number of frequently asked questions back from the field teams this year. And so I've put some of them into this slide. And since we got this and we built this out, there's been a number of Clubroot days organized by the Canola Council of Canada, trying to come together as an industry around this problem and make sure we have some alignment. One of the questions was asked, should I deploy resistance even if I have not seen Clubroot on my farm? And the answer is a very simple and resounding yes. Absolutely 100%, right? Deploy resistance on your farm. And I'll get into a little bit as to the why in a bit, right? And we have a long way to go, right? I know the people in this room have probably been hearing and dealing with Clubroot for a few years, but I saw a stat recently, it's right around 30% of the acres currently have Clubroot resistance deployed on them. We got a long ways to go to be able to get to the goal of having every canola acre across Western Canada with Clubroot resistance on it. Why does resistance break down? This may apply to some folks in this room a little bit. And so some of the information regarding Clubroot, right? Clubroot they found is a population of different pathotypes, often in a field. And you can see if you think of those 3 green boxes as different years that canola's been grown in your rotation, that first year you deploy, say, CR1 resistance, right? The most predominant resistance that's offered in the marketplace right now. And 3H was the predominant pathotype in that field. It worked. It did its job. It protected against 3H. But this is just a hypothetical example. Say you had a little wee bit of 3A pathotype in that field that it didn't protect against. You didn't maybe notice any Clubroot that year. Maybe the effects were minimal enough that you didn't see it. The red arrow is 1 year of wheat. And you come back in with canola again, and that same resistance package. 3A is again able to increase a little bit. 3H is declining because it can't infect anything, but 3A is increasing. You grow wheat, you come back again with CR1, and all of a sudden you have Clubroot all over your field. You say, why did this break down? Well, it didn't happen immediately. It was over time, right? And so that's how the resistance mechanisms can start to break down. And so again, this probably applies to a few people in this room. When should I rotate sources to avoid that resistance breakdown? If you have been growing a Clubroot resistant product for the, maybe you've had it on your farm on the same field 2 or 3 times. If you have resistance breakdown within your municipality or your county or your neighbors, you are among the minority, the unfortunate minority, and you really need to start asking a lot of questions and digging in to what other resistance mechanisms are out there and available in the marketplace. I mentioned 45CM39 and Brevant 3010M are a couple of them. It's gonna narrow, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna narrow your choices a lot when it comes to hybrids and products you can grow, but you should be considering it. For the vast majority of people out there that maybe haven't deployed any Clubroot resistance yet, you don't have Clubroot on your farm, maybe your neighbors don't, the CR1 resistance mechanism will work just fine, and you'll have the maximum choice from products within that segment, because that's kind of the way it's been deployed. Other management recommendations. I breed canola. I spend 5 to 6 days a week thinking about canola, but I'm not going to stand up. We can't tighten rotations. We need to adhere to that 1 and 3. And I said I was going to ask for a favor from the room, right? And if we start to grow Clubroot resistance genetics on a canola or a canola wheat canola rotation, we're going to be challenged, right? From a research organization, we're going to struggle to keep up. We'll do everything we can, everything in our power to be able to keep up. But the more we focus on traits like Clubroot, trying to keep up with that, the less time we can focus on other traits that are just as important or maybe more important, like yield, right? So that would be my favor is, consider rotation. It's really important. Control volunteers and other host weeds quickly. Within 5 weeks, you can start to get infection on your volunteers. Within 9 weeks, you have galls and you have spores, right? So you got to get in there. You have to control your volunteers and control them quickly in all the crops within that rotation to make sure that you don't have spores being produced in those off years. Patch management. I know it's not real popular, maybe a little more popular than washing equipment. But we need, if you go in and you see a field, you got a quarter section and you have a patch off to the side, you've noticed clubroot in it, consider lengthening the rotation on that patch. Consider a perennial. Consider managing that piece differently, right? Manage spore load. And this was, you see these pictures of these galls, but for the longest time, and I know there's some really cool videos, Canola Council's produced some really cool videos around clubroot, but I honestly have a difficult time envisioning what a spore looks like in the soil and how it moves. But if you consider this group 1 wild oats, group 1 resistant wild oats, been around, we're all familiar with them. If you grew wheat and you sprayed a group 1 herbicide and you noticed a few wild oats out in that field after you sprayed, and then you came in 2 years later with your wheat again, sprayed group 1, that patch got bigger, right? Would you then come again 2 years later and spray a group 1? Right? That patch is going to keep getting bigger, and you're going to see those wild oats. They're going to look ugly. You're going to consider doing something about it. Right? So just because you can't see the spores doesn't mean you don't need to focus on them. Right? So for me, that was the real analogy on how to kind of shift my thinking around clubroot and managing that inoculum load. So I've slipped in herbicide here. I mentioned about controlling volunteers. If you do a 1 in 3 rotation, you still have quite a bit of a volunteer weed seed bank, right? We know the weediness of canola. You're going to have issues. You're going to have some volunteers in a 1 in 3. You need to be able to control those volunteers, right? And at Corteva, we're working on Optimum Gly, which is our own glyphosate-resistant trait. We still have a few regulatory hurdles to get over. We got Roundup Ready 1 Genuity, we have Liberty Link, and we have Clearfield. We offer all 3 spectrums. And we're very fortunate in canola to have that option and those opportunities and that flexibility, right? And that's our goal, is to keep all 3 distinct and unique. And one of the ways we do this, not to get too technical, but one of the ways we do this, you see that funnel on the far right side, the breeding funnel. So we actually breed with and move all our material through the system in a non-herbicide tolerant package. So all those plots I showed you earlier that we're out there spraying, we're spraying those with post-muster Lontrell or some version thereof, right? Something obviously nobody in the room wants to go back to, but we do that, and what that enables us is to maximize the capacity within our breeding program, to keep that scale within our breeding program, because breeding is still about numbers. And then when we get close to registration and we need to get that registration data, we come and we pick that hybrid, we insert the herbicide tolerance gene, and we get the registration on that. Right? So we're just, this method is just starting to mature, but there will be a time in the future probably where you can get a Liberty hybrid and a Clearfield hybrid and an Optimum Gly hybrid that are all the same base genetics, right? So if you're really happy with an agronomic package that you're getting, you potentially could have 3 different herbicide options to select from. I mentioned about rotating crops. I don't live in a bubble. We have a lot of other options at Corteva that growers can use. Prospect is one of the newest ones. Pre-emerge herbicide before canola to get rid of those volunteers early. Like I mentioned, you got to get rid of them early. You don't want to be waiting 9 weeks to control that, right, and have that propagating spores. I have cereals on here. We have a lot of broadleaf herbicides. I don't know them. I don't pretend to be an expert in that space, but I know we have a lot of them that work very well. Sortan in corn to control your Roundup volunteers. And I'm really excited to enlist, so E3 soybeans has 00 and 000 soybeans. Out in Alberta, 000 soybeans would be an absolute must. I know there's maybe some people in the room that even 000s might be a challenge for. But in Manitoba and a good chunk of Saskatchewan even, being able to spray 2,4-D to clean up your canola volunteers is going to be a big game changer, right? So that's going to be exciting. And that's it for Clubroot. So hopefully there's some takeaways there. Like I said, the main takeaway, please deploy Clubroot resistant genetics onto your farm as soon as possible. You know, as an industry, we're maybe not prepared to have everything in 2020 as a product, but we want to get there, right? And with your help and with you guys demanding those products from the companies, from us at Corteva, that will send a big signal to get us transitioned even quicker. Blackleg. So Justine did a really great job. I attended her blackleg session. She did a really great job. If you were able to attend it, you probably are aware of a lot of this information. But we breed, do forward breeding, so all the genetics going into the top of that breeding funnel that I showed you earlier have foundational multigenic blackleg resistance or minor genes. So we select for that throughout the funnel to make sure that we have that in the background of our genetics. You might get a little bit of blackleg in there, but you're not going to get a crash, right? It's that backup, that strong foundation or backbone in terms of blackleg resistance. And we are layering in single gene seedling resistance as well, right, to be able to offer that. But if you are the unfortunate grower where maybe that seedling resistance isn't effective on your farm and you don't know it, and we as a company don't know it, you still have that backup of that foundational multigenic resistance, right? So that's and I don't have products on this slide because our mandate from research is to deliver resistant products, period, to blackleg. Sclerotinia, it was a bit, I was out in Alberta a couple of times this year, and it was a lot wetter out here than it was in Manitoba. Typically, Manitoba has more Sclerotinia than Alberta, but that was kind of reversed this past year. We've been breeding Sclerotinia-resistant products. Our first deployment was 2009. We're continuing on that theme, and you can see 45CS40 was our first delivery of that Clubroot stack with Sclerotinia. I'm really excited this year to see a product move forward into the field that's actually going to be a Clubroot Sclerotinia Harvest Max stack with a Liberty gene, so Liberty Link hybrid. Really excited to see that one in the field. And you see these two pictures. These were taken, I took these pictures in Rosebank a number of years ago before 45S52 was actually commercialized. And I walked into the field and it was plain as day. As soon as you walked up to these plots, 45H29, you can see that all those white plants, complete girdling, complete plant death, you know, and a big effect on yield. 45S52, we didn't have really any girdling. We did have infection. It's not completely fungicide replacement. We're working towards that. But it's upper branch, later infection, a lot less impact on yield overall. Right? So we're continuing to drive this space. We want to get to fungicide replacement. Right? We want to get to increasing that flexibility and simplifying management through giving you Sclerotinia resistance in the seed. So that was integrated pest management. Now I'm going to focus a little bit on the harvest management through discuss our Harvest Max trait a little bit. 46M34 was the first product that we deployed back in 2015. It was mid-2000s we started working on this trait. You know, we built a machine to mimic wind events to be able to start screening our material and looking, and you can see the picture there. We have the susceptible beside resistant on the top left picture. And you can see 46M34 and H29 in strip trials, right? So we do have differentiation within these genetics. Brevant 3010M would be the latest deployment of our Harvest Max genetics and trying to combine that with our other traits such as Clubroot and Sclerotinia tolerance. A lot of discussion around ratings. It was a tough fall, right? There's a lot of discussion around ratings. How do we do ratings in Sclerotinia? How do we determine if something is a Harvest Max product? Well, it starts early. So the first two pictures on the slide are taken from a nursery in Carmen. We plant those genotypes out there before they're like probably 4 to 5 years before they're anywhere near commercialization. We plant out there the best genetics we have for Harvest Max. We plant kind of the baseline genetics that wouldn't be considered Harvest Max. And we either wait for a wind event, or if we can't get it, we go in and mimic it. And we go in and we enforce, if we have to enforce it, we want to get to a point where those shatter tolerant or Harvest Max products are starting to shatter out a little bit, right? So you're pushing the genetics as far as you can. And then we go in and we collect our ratings. And you can see the first picture, right? That product is obviously not Harvest Max. You get to the next one, there's 3 rows there. You can see there's a little bit of shattering on each row except the one in the center, and it is a lot more shatter tolerant. Once you get further down that pipeline, we get into testing a lot more broadly. That picture's taken just outside of Edmonton here in November. We harvested in November because we were waiting to get shattering on our plots, and we harvest them. You can see the one that is white obviously didn't make it. The one that is brown, you know, if it's tested across enough years and enough environments and shows up consistently enough, that's how it gets the Harvest Max rating. Right? So that is our goal, and that's our mandate to deliver on Harvest Max. Fertility management. This was a tougher one for me when I got to this one when I'm building out the slide set. We're not necessarily breeding for nitrogen use efficiency or phosphorus use efficiency currently. However, right, there's a strong influence on roots. Obviously, there's a number of papers indicating that hybrids are more effective at either scavenging or utilizing nitrogen. So we've moved in that direction inadvertently through the switch over to hybrids. There's research out there into root angle versus rooting depth in the public space. It's not something we're necessarily breeding for yet. I did my master's on roots, and obviously roots is tied to yield, it is tied to fertility management, and it is something we need to continue to drive on, but we can't unfortunately do everything at once, and this is a space we need to continue to work on. I think there's a lot of work yet to be done even in the agronomic space in terms of timing, what types of fertilizer are used and when to maximize yield and minimize the amount of nitrogen used. And one of the reasons this is on there, right, it's on there because of the increase of 3 bushels an acre, but it's also going to be on there around that sustainability part. If you've attended some of the other talks, I heard the word sustainability in a number of them, and that's coming from the consumer, right? That's coming from large organizations such as Walmart and General Mills and others that are looking at our industry wanting to make sure that we're sustainable. And this is going to be a part of that. And Corteva does have a couple of products, Entrench and Enserve, in terms of nitrogen stabilizers to use, but this is a space we need to continue to investigate. Plant establishment, cold and frost. I mentioned we have breeding programs over in Europe where they plant in September, survives through the winter, flowers in early spring, and they're harvesting it in July. So we're exploiting some of those genetics here in North America. Winter canola does not work, obviously, in the prairies. But we're trying to exploit some of those genetics that are able to survive, you know, colder temperatures. And you can see here, -6, -7, -8, and -9 treatments. On the right-hand side of that line is something that was not selected for to have cold and frost tolerance, and the one on the left was. And you can see there have been gains made. It's further down in the development pipeline, but I think this one has a big potential to offer that decreased risk piece to growers, and it's something we need to continue to work on. It's a dynamic piece. It's fairly challenging for us to work in that space, right, between the cold soil, the frost events, the different management practices that all influence this. But if we can combine this with solid seed treatments and get that seed out of the ground, established, uniform establishment, we're ahead of the game in terms of a lot of other issues that canola faces. So this is an active space for us, but a little bit further down the development pipeline. And finally, the big bucket, 8 bushels an acre on genetic improvements. So this figure is historical US corn grain yields. I found this on the internet. There's a source there at the bottom. It goes back to 1866. There was a lot of years there they had no genetic gain, right? There was no yield increases. Then you see kind of the 40s, 50s, they get into F1 hybrids really start to take off in the US, and that's when gains really start to take off. And at Corteva, we have a large canola breeding program, corn breeding program in the US, and I'm constantly getting questions and getting compared to how corn is doing. Right? And we often hear, why can't my yields increase similarly to corn, especially in Manitoba? I'll have growers in Manitoba often give me this question. My canola yields are the same, but my corn yields have gone way up. And so I wanted to dig into this and see what it looks like in Western Canada. And so I pulled this data from the Canola Council website. It's our average yields going back to 1986. Obviously, we can't go back to 1866. And you see the blue area there. Those were open pollinated. It's 1986 to 1985. Those were essentially open pollinated, non-herbicide tolerant genetics. We had no gain, right? 46A65, if I go back to those days, that was before my time. But then 96 to 2007, herbicide tolerance, right? So changing of management practices, obviously in the industry, as well as a transition over to hybrids. And we start to see a 1.9% genetic gain through that period. And then this is a slightly arbitrary break in 2007, but it happened somewhere in there where essentially we are switched over to hybrids and we're switched over to herbicide tolerance. Right? Everybody's switched over. And you look at what's going on during that period, we're getting a genetic gain of 2.3% over that period. So we're really starting to increase that. Along with this, if you looked, I'm guessing if you dug into it and looked at the amount of private investment and the research dollars that are going into it, you would probably see a somewhat similar trend, hopefully not as steep. Hopefully we're bringing some value to the industry. But there's a lot more investment going into this. And if you consider the amount of energy per acre, again, back to that sustainability piece, if you consider the amount of energy per acre that's produced in canola oil, right, versus starch, we're about 3 to 1 in terms of energy that we're producing in 90 to 100 days. We should be very proud as an industry how far we've come and the returns we're delivering on the sustainability front in terms of canola, right? And this is 32 years, right? Not 90. So you think there's a lot more to come. And with that, this is my last slide. And I had to talk a little bit about breeding methods. I am a breeder. So I wanted to say, how are we going to deliver on increasing that 2.3%? Because we do have challenges around Clubroot, around all our other pests that we're trying to deliver on. Predictions. It sounds a little far-fetched when you first hear it, when you first think about it. But at Corteva, we've deployed predictive breeding. About 5 years ago, we started this in canola. It's been about 10 or 11 years in corn. And so if I just explain it maybe briefly, you see that breeding funnel you saw earlier, a lot of genetics go in the top of that funnel. We know the genetics. It's really cheap to get the genotypic information on those, but really expensive to phenotype them and grow them in the field. So you get fewer and fewer as you go to more and more environments. But once you have that phenotypic information of those products at the bottom and you recombine them, right? So you want to mix and match them to get the next best material to put back in the top of that funnel. That's all your phenotype. That's your phenotypic information. You've spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get a phenotype on a single inbred. And you want to exploit that information. And so because you have all that great phenotypic information, you know how that inbred performs, and you know the genetics of its siblings, of its sons and daughters that are going back into that top of that funnel, you can exploit those relationships and actually predict the performance of those inbreds before they ever touch soil. It sounds a little far-fetched. We're never going to get to the point where we just predict something and move it. It can skip 5 years or 6 years. You still need to go to the field. But the analogy to if you play cards or poker, if you were able to throw out all the, or only keep the face cards to go into the top of that funnel, the likelihood of getting a good poker hand goes up dramatically. And that's what we're able to do with predictions. We have a finite set of resources as well. And if we can throw away that junk before it ever touches soil, before we spend barely any money on it, and only keep the best stuff, the cream of the crop, we're going to make gains faster, and you'll see that 2.3% increase even further in future years, because we need to get there to be able to do the aggressive mandate that the Canola Council set out for 52 bushels an acre. So with that, I'll conclude. Hopefully you had some takeaways here that we are at Corteva breeding for sustainability and profitability. right? We're trying to reduce risk, increase value, and simplify management. So with that, I thank you for your time. And I'm not sure if there's any time for questions or not. But if there are any questions, I'd be willing to take them. And I'm also over in the booth. I'll be at the Corteva booth here for the remainder of the afternoon. If anyone has any questions or feedback to make sure that we at Corteva are aligned with some of the grower needs. So thank you for your time.